Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Brantley,
And I'm Michael Diego.
and we are the Social Enterprise Guys.
We're two social entrepreneurs, and we're building a network of social enterprises to help each other do good business better.
In episode 2 of the Social Enterprise Guys, we have Nathan Stuck. Nathan is the Director of Corporate Culture at Ad Victoriam Solutions. He is also the co-founder and chairman of Be Local Georgia. We go a little bit into Nathan's background. All three of us actually went to the University of Georgia, and while Nathan was there, it turned out to be very inspiring and really influenced where he is now. But Michael, I'm curious to know if anything, if you got the bug while you were in college there.
I got the bug. I don't think I got the bug, but I was inspired by some of the things that I learned while I was at the University of Georgia. So yeah, like Stephen mentioned, we all three were there actually at the same time. We cover that in the episode. But yeah, so I actually studied journalism. I was in the Grady College of Media Studies, journalism and media studies, and I think the thing that was most inspiring and interesting for me was that I was studying kind of like the intersection of media and society, and how media kind of creates social structures and systems, and going all the way back to like the introduction of the radio, more visual media, now into like television and social media. And what I found was so fascinating is how media can kind of it creates culture in many ways. And like today, you have social media, right? That is created a new culture around how people interact, how people engage, and how people think about themselves and society in general. And I think ultimately that kind of what got me excited about technology, right? Technology is what enabled social media. And whatever platform comes next, I feel like it will be a very experiential technology, right? You get into things like AR and VR, but what I'm passionate about is how technology creates real world experiences, right? And at the end of the day, that's what Wise Assistant seeks to do. We are essentially a productivity service that's supposed to make it as easy as possible for groups to come together and enjoy experiences rather than just consuming media and content. So yeah, I don't know if that was a bug, but it's definitely something that inspired me during my time at UGA, and being a part of the journalism school was not exactly how I thought it was going to be, but it inspired me nonetheless. Anyway, that was a long explanation. I studied Latin American cinema, which I thought was really fascinating. Like the filmmakers in Brazil, they talked about film as like a weapon that they use to reshape ideology, and I could talk about that all day. But today we're going to be talking to Nathan, and we're going to be talking about a class that he took when he was going there to get his MBA, and how that really set him on a life of shaping capitalism to be a force for good. And and yeah, but Stephen, let's talk about the call to action for today.
There are different types of social enterprises. There are three different types mainly. You have opportunity employment, which hires people that are in need and can't get regular employment. There are the transformative products and services. So, for example, Brantley Performance Management, we provide consulting services, strategic planning exclusively to social enterprises and nonprofits. So we would fit within that realm. And then there's also the donate back. So those businesses that donate either time or a portion of their profit to charity or other forms of philanthropy. And technically, I guess Brantley Performance Management, I also do a decent amount of pro bono work, so it would fit within that. But my goal is to also donate back a portion of profits. And what about Wise Assistant? What would you classify Wise Assistant as?
Yeah, I'd classify Wise Assistant as an innovative product. We're actually a service, but you've got a lot of these apps and platforms that are very vertical in nature. And what Wise seeks to really do is to help reduce app switching between all these different products and services by acting horizontally across the planning landscape. So at the end of the day, we seek to kind of like weave together all the tools that you're using for planning today, rather than have you kind of flip between text message and Google Docs and Eventbrite and Yelp and all these other tools. We kind of act as a automation tool that pushes you along this process. So yeah, I mean, we have to be innovating or we're not going to survive. So that's where I would classify our business. And at the end of the day, it's around social wellness, right? We want to get people and groups together to help businesses, connect with new groups and also like groups connect with each other.
And in episode 1, we asked for our call to action was for people to share that they are a social entrepreneur, if they are one, and that they share that they are a part of a social enterprise. So for this episode, your call to action is to explain very simply on social media why you are a social enterprise. Is it, and what type of social enterprise are you? Are you opportunity employment? Are you a donate back, or do you provide transformative products or services, or a combination of any of those? So that is your call to action, and it can be only one very simple, a few words on a post or something. But you can check out the Social Enterprise Guys Facebook page and our company pages for examples, and we'll be doing that as well.
And tag us in your post. Tag
Yes.
Social Enterprise Guys so that we can see it, we can share it. And we can get to know you.
And do hashtag Social Enterprise Guys, hashtag Good Business Better. And please join our Facebook group. The Facebook group is already growing, and that's really where we're going to build a network where we're helping each other do good business better. So hope you enjoy episode 2 of the Social Enterprise Guys. Nathan, welcome to the podcast.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you on. I've spoken with you before, and you actually connected me with our first guest, Garima Sharma, and so we released that at this point, and that was a great interview. And you're very well connected in the benefit corporation movement and the social enterprise movement. So we certainly wanted to have you on. Let's start off with something that we all have in common. We actually all went to the University of Georgia. Michael and I got our undergraduate degrees from there, but you got both your undergrad and your graduate degree. So you are a double dog is what we call it. But yeah, so tell us, how did UGA affect your career choice, your desire to give back in the business world?
I think undergrad, I don't know. I mean, undergrad was, for me, it was like a matter of like getting out as quickly as possible and like going to make money. Cause for some reason in my head, that was a really good idea. And you look back on it and you're like, those are years of your life and experiences that you'll never get back. But I definitely, as I went back to get my MBA, I was in a weird, I don't say like a weird place, but I had, I think for the first like 8 years of my career, I'd had 2 different employers. And, I even came back to work for the one I worked for out of college in Athens. And like, 6-7 years later, I moved back to Athens and worked for them again. And then I went like 2 years with 4 different jobs. I got laid off twice in 2013. And I was at a point where like business, I had like a sour taste in my mouth for business, if that makes sense, or capitalism or whatever you want to call it. But I still love business. I love those, like, I love solving problems. I love figuring out like, where's the end? Like, what's the goal line look like, and reverse engineering the solution. I love whiteboarding. I love figuring out like what drives people to do something. And so how do we adapt our behavior to drive that behavior we want to induce, like the marketing piece of it. So I've always loved business. I think I was a little jaded on just kind of seeing business done in not such an ethical fashion. So when it was time to get my MBA and I got to Georgia, it was A, it was a great chance to hit reset, but B, I joined the Net Impact Club immediately. And I mean, we went to a couple meetings, and then all of a sudden there was an email from Jake Mosley, who's another B academic like Garima is, and they had a project to work on a B Corp certification for for Ad Victoriam Solutions, who I now work for. So I got into that project, and that just to me was like eye-opening. It was, here's this guy, and he is capitalist through and through. Like, he is a business guy, and he's been in IT his whole life, but he wants to build something different, and he wants to bake purpose into the business model. At that point, we had 8 employees, and so he wanted to certify as a B Corp. Like, he's just still figuring out like a revenue model and how to scale. And like, we had, again, 8 employees, and it was like, how do we do all these other things? So he kind of like outsourced this. Like, you guys come back and tell me what I need to do. And that's where I really just fell in love with all of that. And I think that, coming back to your question, is where that light switch turned on, that I got really lucky to find this job. I mean, I put myself in a position, I networked, and I talk to students about this stuff all the time. Like, if you want to be in a certain field, if you want to work in, branding, or you want to work in market research, like, I mean, you can have accountant friends, but it doesn't behoove you to be networking with accountants while you're an undergrad. Go find the market research people, do informational interviews, meet these people. So, I mean, there was some intention in my search, but the project fell into my lap. That element of like, here's this growing company that suddenly kind of can use an MBA to kind of be the unbillable guy at a consulting shop. So I took it upon myself from then on to kind of make sure that I paid that forward. Just that stroke of luck, or being in the right place at the right time, and helping students who are eager enough to take those steps to help them connect, to help them, fix resumes, who can I introduce to, which doors can I open? So it definitely sparked and being in Athens helps, but it sparked my desire to always want to give back to that university and help the students. I mean, I'll help students from any university really, but living here, I mean, I still am a chapter advisor for my old fraternity. I speak all the time at Terry events and welcome weekends and things like that. So yeah, I think it's just I think it's also part of just, as you get to a certain level in your career, there's that desire for meaning and purpose. And I think it provides one, to give back and to open a door that maybe you wish somebody had opened for you 15, 20 years ago. So I think that answers the question. It was a long-winded story.
There's so much to unpack there. I don't even know where to start. Like, first of all, Nathan, like, we just kind of met just a second ago. So nice to meet you. Go Dogs, all that good stuff. I know I've checked out your LinkedIn, but like, when did you do your undergrad? Like, were we ever in Athens? Or that's too personal. Like,
I mean, luckily the lighting doesn't show all the gray in my beard, but yeah, I did undergrad. I got here, my freshman year was 2001, and then I graduated in 2004, and I stuck around for another year and a half and worked in Athens. And, all my friends were still in college, and now I had a job making like real money, which is funny to look back and think about what real money was in 2004. But
right.
yeah, I mean, it was kind of fun to be able to take all your college friends out who are, and you're just like, I'll buy the round, and of course it's Athens. So they're like, that'll be $12. So
12 drinks for $12, right?
So, and then as I got, like, I think I left Athens when I was like 23, and I was like, more and more of my friends were leaving. And I was like, kind of like, why am I still here? And I want to go see places. So I moved out west. I actually moved to Las Vegas to try my hand at professional poker. That lasted like 3 months. I did pay my bills. So I guess technically I can say I was a professional poker player, but I wasn't on TV. Let's put it that way. It's not as glamorous as it appears. So, but yeah, I moved out to Vegas. I was out there for 5 years. I ended up moving back to Athens in 2011, and just kind of on a whim, just kind of didn't know what I was going to do next after Vegas, and happened to ask.
You've been there since 2011?
I've been back in Athens since 11. Yeah. So
okay.
Now Athens is now the place I've lived the longest in my life. So
okay, so we were there at the same time. I wasn't in Terry, so I was in Grady, but we were walking the campus at the same time,
Yeah, we were all there. That's I graduated in 2016.
Same. So Steve and I graduated the same year, except we had never met when we were at school. So funny
And
how
I
the world.
was I was political science, so I was like walking past the journalism building every day to my classes, which is and Terry, all that stuff up in North Campus.
And I
So there was,
started my MBA in fall of 15. So we definitely overlapped at Tate some point. We went to Barbaritos at the same time.
For sure. So you're saying it's like you're directly connecting like kind of where you are now to your classes at Terry's MBA program?
Yeah, classes and experiential projects. I mean, that MBA program I had a hunch when I was applying, just doing research and meeting some of the people that because I mean, forever, the Terry MBA was like a real estate MBA, basically. Like that's what we specialized in. And they had pivoted already, but I just got the sense that they were really trying to do something special and really make that MBA not just like a nice ancillary, like, okay, we're focused on Terry undergrad. I could tell that they were really focused on building a powerhouse MBA program. So, I mean, they made it so competitive to keep top talent that was in state going there from a cost perspective, scholarships, assistantships, that it was a no-brainer. But I mean, it was a fantastic experience from this. I mean, the professors were great. Your class size, I mean, our cohort was 48. So, I mean, I knew everybody. You got to build relationships. So you really built a network. And then they let me do all kinds of experiential learning projects. Like I would find stuff like the B Corp project I didn't even get class credit for. I just worked on that. It was supposed to be a semester, and I kept working on it for another, I guess, for my last 3 semesters, essentially. I just kept going and working on it because I liked the why behind it. And I figured maybe I can get a job out of it, which I did. So it didn't hurt. I put in some free work, but got a nice job. And but yeah, I did like market research for local startups. I did, and I mean, again, a lot of them, some of them I got credit for, some of them I didn't, but they really allowed me to like explore everything that was out there, because you're hitting reset, and I was in my mid 30s, so you hit reset at that age, and you better get it right. You don't have there's no nuclear. It was the nuclear option. So yeah, I mean, they let me just kind of, I was really into market research, and I went down that rabbit hole a lot. And I think that was, it makes it sound like I didn't end up doing it, but everything you do in business is kind of a market research project. So you're learning kind of like, what's my hypothesis and like, what are some solutions? And then you're testing them. It's a little bit of design thinking. And so it's like everything I learned in that program, I use all the time. And even the stuff I hated, sorry to all my accounting and finance friends, I still ended up using, because I came into a role where they're like, you have an MBA, you can do everything. So next thing you know, I'm doing kind of like, what's the return on this over a couple of years or 3 years? What's our payback period? What's our, even just basic accounting of like managing a P&L, where like, oh, this is that stuff I learned that I was really bored in that class. Got it. Yeah, I can do this. So I don't know. They really opened doors. They opened networks. They provided opportunities. It was what you made out of it, and I think I made the most. But yeah, I'm again, I don't want to say if I was lucky or if I planned it well or if the stars just aligned. But I'm that experience definitely changed me and set me up for all the success I've enjoyed since graduation. So I mean, that's why the walls all joy. That's why it's like, yeah, I love the football team, but like I love the university. I love the campus. I love the people and the professors, and just always will be very special to me.
Yeah, I gotta say your background's a lot more decorated than mine. Like it's pretty low key back here. But anyway, enough about that. Why so sour towards business? That's the next thing I'm thinking. Like what about it? Like double click on that.
Yeah, let's open that in a new tab. How do I tell this story in the most polite way? So beginning of 2013, the company that we worked for, we had a little satellite office down here, a little mom and pop company out of Iowa, and they had an office here that I had opened in 2004. I was like the first person they hired. We opened the office, we got it running. I left. I don't know that I was the biggest fan of working in the logistics industry, trucking. It's stressful. It's all day. It never stops. You hate holidays. It's a grind. And, but when I came back, we had it to a well-oiled machine. I was impressed, and we did what we could handle and what we were good at. And we said no to the rest, and we made money, and customer was happy. And then that customer got bought by a bigger company that also owned a trucking line. And then they essentially weren't even going to tell us. They literally, one of the plant managers felt bad that what they were doing, and she basically let it slip of what was going to happen. And on January 31st, you guys are out of here. And they're bringing in their own trucks and blah, blah, blah. And our drivers were all going to get laid off, and all our drivers, it was a really sweet gig for them, because most trucking jobs, you're over the road for, 2 to 3 to 4 weeks at a time. And this one was home every night, rare exceptions that they weren't. So it's a really good job for them. And so she let it slip, and we were able to kind of our owner negotiated with their guy to let us kind of take some of our drivers, and do we want to go to work for them? And of course I made, everything happens for a reason. So I won't say I made the mistake of going there. Cause it's part of my story now, but, we went over there and, had to reinvent the wheel, and, everybody took pay cuts, and that was the first glimmer of appreciating that taking care of your people aspect, that, a big section of the B Corp or the B impact assessment to certify the assessment you have to take is workers. And how do you treat your workers? What's the pay multiplier? And I looked at, and I thought about this, that we had two brothers that owned that company I worked for out of Iowa. It was two brothers. Their parents had started it, and now it was the two kids running it. And I looked at this company that I think in 2019, the last time I looked them up, they did $51 billion in revenue. Huge company. And they shaved about $200,000 a year off the bottom line of salaries, of just my drivers took what amounted to about a 15% pay cut. I took a pay cut, and you're thinking to yourself of what did that 200,000, that was 100,000 per brother that they were paying us extra every year because it was fair. And even for the office staff, we couldn't really, there was no promotion. There's nowhere, unless you wanted to move to Iowa, there was so every year you just oh, no promotion, but here's a little bit more on your salary. Cool. Thanks. It was just a great company to work for. And then to go to this behemoth where you're what was that? A millionth of a cent on a dividend check? Really? And basically a take it or leave it attitude when it was just, everything they did was so lacking in transparency, lacking in any sort of, everything was shady and don't say anything. And just a little bit it was just, it was. And of course, 6 months in, I got it up and running and kind of had it down from an 80-hour work week for myself to 45, 50. And that's when they severance me. So, and you're wow. And then they dumped it all on somebody else's plate. And we're no more money. No, you just get all his work. Good luck. Because I was friends with him. And those are the types of stories though that just blow your mind, where you're that's not how you do business. And so you walk away from that, in your, in a fog of did that just happen? Did that was, and that to me was Milton Friedman capitalism at its finest, maximize shareholder value, no matter who you step on to get there. These people that work for you don't matter. And it was that was experience number one. And then, I ended up, back in Atlanta, or actually for the first time in Atlanta, back at Enterprise. And I did that and I ended up in their used car division. Which I just couldn't get excited about, telling somebody about this amazing 16% interest rate on a 2-year-old car on a 72-month note, where I'm don't do it. Save up for another year, get your credit score up, come back and see me. So I wasn't very good at selling cars. Go figure. But I'm no, this is a horrible life decision for this person to make, and I can't be a part of it. So I finally got what at the time I thought was lucky. And I met a couple who had a small business, and I got them my resume, and they needed somebody to work the German market. And I speak German, and you're thinking to yourself, this is it. And I remember I made it maybe 2.5 months there. And on my last week, my breaking point And there were multiple breaking points. My breaking point was when he told me that they weren't paying me for my ideas. They were paying me to execute the plan that they had already proven works. I'm like, but you're leaving money on the table. All these like things where you're like, but I have great ideas. And they're like, yeah, we really don't care about your ideas. Just go do this. And it was like, all right, well, it was wonderful getting to know y'all. This isn't for me. And so that's what I left. Like, that's what I walked away from. And with no plan, hadn't even applied to grad school yet. It was June. So I've missed the cutoff. So I'm going to have a year to kill, but I literally could not go back there one more day. And so I had a year to kill and I drove an Uber. I read a lot of Thomas Piketty, Capital in the 21st Century, which doesn't help you when you're jaded on capitalism. I was Athens' first Uber driver, so there's a chance our paths crossed then. And I did setup shifts at the convention center, at the Classic Center in Athens. And that's where, too, it's like, talk about your journey to this, why you're such an advocate for B Corp. It's like, well, okay, so I worked 2 jobs. I never could scrape together like 2 nickels out of, Ubering and $8 an hour shifts, like rolling, chafing dishes and things. So wherever the event was in the Classic Center, and picking up an occasional bartending shift. And I realized too, like the people I was working with, this was their life. Like, this is what they do. And they do it at like 3 different places for $8 an hour, all part-time, no benefits. And you're like, and like, for me, there was a light at the end of the tunnel. At this point now, I've taken the GMAT. I did really well. I'm into Georgia. Like, as soon as that first scholarship check hits, I will see y'all later. And for these people, this is their life. Like, this is what they do every day. This is their existence. And nobody should work that hard. And then also be like victimized. Like, well, if you worked harder, you'd be in a better spot in life. And nobody should work that hard, not have benefits, not be able to like provide for their family and at least see their family do better, their children do better than them. So I don't know, that's, I guess that puts the framework into when I got here and what kind of mindset I was in of like, all right, maybe this was my mission, was to be this like crusader for a capitalism that works for everybody, and works for the long term. So that's kind of, that's where I walked in.
But most of the time when I'm thinking of social enterprises, it's I think of them as organizations that focus on kind of giving back to the community. And I guess I don't consider enough that they also can give back to their employees and treat them better, and kind of take that human resources frame of treating them well. So that's a very important consideration. Can you tell us, well, first of all, tell us more about, so you're the director of corporate culture at Ad Victoriam Solutions. So tell us what Ad Victoriam Solutions is, and exactly what you do in that role.
Great question. So we are a Salesforce and MuleSoft partner. We do everything: implementations, data migrations, org migrations, org mergers. As far as like the technology piece behind the scenes, we'll integrate different software with Salesforce. All the data's feeding into one place. Basically, if it can be done on Salesforce, we're who you want to hire. And then the culture role, I mean, it grew out of, and it's funny how many B Corps I talk about this. It's like the beekeeper role is what we call it, because it's the person who basically navigated the assessment. So more about most of these things than anybody else in the company. And so it just kind of grew out of that, but we were still scaling. So it was difficult for us to like justify me doing it full time, if that makes sense. Like it was funny because I heard our CEO give an interview a couple of weeks ago, and he actually said, he's like, yeah, Nathan basically had 2 full-time jobs for a long time. They needed somebody to run operations. And I did a lot of, and then like 3 weeks into being here, the woman that did all of our invoicing and accounts receivable put in her notice. So then I took over invoicing. She's like, here, MBA, you can do this. My love of details and spreadsheets and all those things that I'm just so happy to work with. But I did that for, 2-3 years. So it was a lot of hats, and then also managing this on the side. And we've scaled to a point now where we need somebody full-time focused on this, because there is I think the beauty of the B Corp journey, if you will, is that like continuous improvement. Like it's always, you can always do better, and you're never done. So having somebody that is now like, for me now, that's all I do. It's this and strategic impact. So I'm looking for partnerships. I'm looking for nonprofits to support. I'm looking for people we can collaborate with. I'll jump on calls and just meet people and see where can we plug you in? Where can you plug us in? But then also planning fun stuff for the office. I mean, this week alone, let's see, I've signed contracts for our holiday party, a movie night, and a happy hour at the Computer Museum of America. So like fun stuff for them to do. Also negotiating for virtual stuff because we're now, I ran the numbers this week. We're now 55% remote. Like pre-COVID, like our workforce not in Atlanta doesn't come in the office, 55%. So how can I create that engagement or that engaged experience for them when they might see their coworkers once or twice a year? So how can I create the valuable touch points? How can I work with the management team and, some of the team leads and the product leads and our executives to facilitate kind of the water cooler moments? So it's grown from just kind of like being the B Corp guy into like a pseudo, I wouldn't say HR because I don't do any like paperwork or I do our culture onboarding, but I don't do a lot of the traditional HR things. But in a weird way, a lot of my metrics are the same as HR. It's retention, it's engagement, it's, do people like working for us? Like it's those types of things of like creating an awesome experience and making sure, like I also sit in on our marketing stand-ups because I think probably the most crucial part of my job is making sure what we say we're doing aligns with what we're actually doing, or what's perceived by our people is what we're doing. We can think we're great, but if they don't, it doesn't matter. So aligning those, so making sure that there's as minimal of a gap as possible between what we say and what we do. So yeah, it's a lot, and it's fun because it's a journey and you're always learning. So because I wasn't an organizational behavior MBA. I didn't really take a lot of OB classes or HR classes in undergrad. I'd never really had the experience. But again, it goes back to some of that market research stuff. And it's a lot of those things. Like it's just a new problem to solve. And you just kind of have to make yourself a subject matter expert and then apply the same methodologies that have always worked for you. So yeah, but it's a fun job. I mean, it's a great job. Everybody, I mean, it's still busy. It's still work. There's still things I don't like doing, but for the most part, like, I don't know, he shoots, he scores. Like I found a pretty good one.
Yeah. How rapidly are these positions growing? Are they growing as fast as B Corps in general?
Yeah, I
What
think
advice would you give to people that were looking for something like that?
It's not listed. It's probably not listed. If it is, you probably don't have the experience for it. I saw one today. I forget who it was with. Some like international company, like, oh, Starbucks, director of sustainability. I was like, yeah, that job you're probably not qualified for. So it's going to be somebody that started where I started and kept working and has been doing this for 25 years. That's where you land. So yeah, I mean, I think that's number one, is that it requires a lot of networking. It requires a lot of putting yourself in the right place and surrounding yourself with the right people and becoming an expert, or I wouldn't even say an expert, becoming a student of all things sustainability. I don't claim to be an expert on the environmental side because the majority of my experience with the B Corp, with the B impact assessment, has not been on the environmental side, just because we don't have a huge supply chain. Like literally you're talking to me on our supply chain. It's my MacBook. So, but I've become a student of all other facets. And I encourage that, of like, even if you know enough, like to be able to talk knowledgeably about the environmental piece, but the people piece, the corporate governance piece, the community piece, community impact, and then even some of the customer. There's like a little small section at the end of the assessment on customers, but like become a student of those things, like learn those things. Everything's virtual now. Attend webinars, attend meetings, network, and you get into a breakout room. You add 5 people to your network. You have a call with 2 of them. One of them pays. Like make those investments in yourself, and especially when you're a student, play the student card. And then yeah, you're gonna network into where somebody goes like, you'd be perfect for a role I've been thinking about, and then that's how you end up with I mean, even for me, it was like my first job with Ad Vic it was, I mean, one of my roles was help us finish and get certified, but it was like, man, we need some operational help right now. And we see your resume and like, sounds like you're pretty good at that. So I mean, my first job was basically, what do you need me to do? I want to work for you. I love the B Corp aspect. What do you need? Operations. Oh, now you need invoicing. Got it. Okay. And we still need to do this B Corp thing. And then it snowballed from there to the point where now I've built up enough trust and equity, or whatever, not equity, but like brand equity, my personal whatever, and my work output, that I think it just kind of, I keep getting more and more of the carving out more of that role that I've wanted. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's like lesson number one though. That job's not posted. So you're gonna have to find it. You're gonna have to network. But you also, I think the point of my becoming a student comment was, put yourself in a position that when opportunity knocks, you're ready, that you don't go like, oh man, that would have been perfect. And it's like, well, it was perfect. You didn't put yourself in a position to be ready for it. And those are always tough lessons to learn. I can claim to be perfect. I'm sure I've had some of those come and go where I'm like, but it's okay to read one more blog post or attend one more webinar. And I don't know, when that knock comes, like, you open the door and they're like, oh, hey, you're here. So I think that's the big piece, is like, invest in yourself. What's the Jim Rohn quote? Always work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So, and even as a student, I would say the same thing.
Got it. So you are the co-founder of Be Local Georgia, and also the chairman. And I want to go into that a little bit, but in episode 1 of the podcast, we briefly discussed the differences between B Corp or certified B corporation and the legal structure of a benefit corporation. So could you tell us how those two are related to one another? Give us a little bit more detail on what those things mean.
Well, hopefully by now all the listeners are excited to my long-winded explanations. I'll try to keep this one brief because it's complicated. Long story short, the guys who, I don't know if y'all remember And One, and they had all the mixtapes and basketball shorts back in the day, and it was like the brand in like the early 2000s. And so the founders of And One, when they sold their company, some VC firm came in and bought it and essentially kind of gutted everything that made it awesome. Great place to work. I mean, ahead of their time benefits, ahead of their time kind of flexibility and balance. And they left and they were like, what just happened to our baby? I mean, they made some good money selling it, but it burned them to see that they had built a really cool place that people enjoyed working, and gave them a sense of purpose, just evaporate overnight. So their next idea was to come up with something to prevent that from happening, to help other entrepreneurs prevent that from happening. So as benefit legislation was starting to become a thing, part of the legislation in Delaware, which is like the gold standard of benefit corporation legislation, was a third-party audit. Every year you'd have to go through a third-party audit of kind of what your public benefit is. And so they created this third-party audit, and as public benefit, the legislation didn't take off as widespread as they would have hoped. I mean, companies started incorporating in Delaware, shocker, but they decided, well, what if we just turn this into a certification and just make it its own thing? But they can also use it for their audit, but we can turn this into and so that's kind of how B Lab was founded, which is the nonprofit that certifies B Corp. But I mean, so they're very related, and it kind of came out of the legislation. And then it went, well, why don't we just let companies just certify as B Corps and make them go through the same assessment, create a threshold? And then they're always iterating, so they update it all the time. But yeah, that's really the distinction. And so really both of them are not mutually exclusive. I don't know what term I'm looking for, but all B Corps are not benefit corporations, and all benefit corporations are not B Corps.
Right.
So then you're starting to see the legislation spread more. We finally got it in Georgia, and some people were upset that it was a little watered down. And in my mind, I said it's the foot in the door. That's the start. We can fix it later, but if we don't have it, there's nothing to fix. So, I mean, it's just more vaguely. I mean, there were some things out of the Delaware model that we didn't get here, but I mean, as for us, we're a B Corp, but we're still an LLC and don't plan on making any changes or reincorporating. So we've amended our articles of incorporation already. And when we went through the assessment to kind of mission lock us and put in our legal framework that we would weigh the inputs and the concerns and just kind of all the bring that to the table for every stakeholder. So how does this impact our environment? How does it impact our customers, our people? So yeah, that's kind of where that's essentially the difference. One's a certification and one is just how you're incorporated. And then you can be both, and there are plenty of both.
And I imagine there are different pros and cons for the legal structures because across the states, because each state has their different versions of the legislation. But what's the real what are some of the main reasons why an organization would become a certified B corporation through B Lab?
Oh, a great question. Love this question. It's the only, I always joke, I call it the gold standard of corporate social responsibility. It's the only third party accredited certification. And I think that people are so wary now of greenwashing. I mean, you see it all the time, and it's not even good anymore. It's just like, oh, like this is like an ad from 1992. Like anybody can see, like this is, instead of like, I mean, for example, like I saw one the other day, and it was like, instead of driving people to change their behaviors, it was driving them to like, oh, recycle your K-cup. And it was like, why don't we tell people like, I want to show somebody like turning their compost, like do that instead. Like, here's my coffee grounds and here's my compost. Like, instead of being like, just recycle that horrible plastic K-cup that probably isn't recyclable in a town near you. So those types of things that I think people are just kind of like, especially with Gen Z coming behind the millennials. Gen Z makes millennials look like we like fling trash out of our car windows. We drive down the highway, and they want it, and they demand it, and they demand their companies. Like, what's the stat? It's like 73% of Gen Z, like almost expects companies to take a stand and be a force for good on societal issues. 73%, like, so it's not even a matter of like, this is a nice to have anymore. Like, you better have it. Or you're not going to attract this next generation of workers. So to me, putting that B Corp logo on, especially as it's becoming more well-known, I mean, go to the grocery store and just pay attention, look for it. It's on your cheese. It's on your milk. It's on your, like, it's everywhere. It's on your kombucha. It's on your yogurt. It's, I mean, I see it more and more. And I think as that brand awareness spreads, it's just a really easy way to just go like, boom. Like when I'm shopping, I don't need to look much further. Might they still have something they do somewhere that isn't perfect? Yeah. But do I know that they've put in a lot of effort and checked a lot of boxes, implemented a ton of policies, rolled out benefits, reduced carbon emissions? Like, have they done a lot of those things? Probably. Like, do they align with my values? Yes. I just need to see the logo. So I think that's benefit number one, especially on the B2C side. On the B2B side, I think there's something to be said for retention. But for us, the biggest value was scaling with purpose and like keeping what mattered to us front of mind, because there was an element of like, when did we finally certify? We had like 20, 25 employees. And when we started the process, we had 8. When we recertified, we had 80, and that was like 3 months ago, and we're at 100 now. So I think I always make the analogy of like a boat that's taking on water. When you're scaling, it gets super choppy. It's just, there's just, for some reason, there's those hurdles that you have to bring in, especially for us in a consulting world. We have to have enough people to do the work we have. We have to bring on extra work to make sure we can grow. And then you kind of create a capacity strain with your, we don't have enough people to do the work. We bring in more people. And then somebody now from that original group goes like, man, I'm working too much. And then they leave. And it was like, this is certain, like for us, it was like mid 30 employees, mid 50s. And probably again around like the 70-ish range, where it just got like really choppy. And I think the easiest thing to throw out of that boat as it takes on water is some of the, like, Nathan's planning a volunteer events. Like, we don't have time for your volunteer events right now. But when it's baked in, it's like we have to do these things. Like we've made commitments. 1% of our revenue goes to volunteer hours and 1% of our revenue goes to pro bono work. We can't say we're doing these things and then it's like, well, it got busy, so we didn't do them. We find a way to still do them. Same thing with like benefits and growing, and even like, there's just so much of it where it's kind of like you have that look in the mirror moment. It's like, put your money where your mouth is. Even diversity and inclusion of like, what can we be doing more of? I think it helped us quantify a lot of KPIs, like diversity and inclusion, like a percentage of females in leadership, like certain things where when you get those numbers back, because now you've quantified them because you did for the assessment, and you're like, that's not where we wanted to be. And sometimes you just don't notice as you're growing and you're hiring anybody that can do the job. And so I think having those KPIs helped us become a lot more intentional as we scaled, and a lot more intentional around like, how can we be better? And, everybody's worked at that job where you take the employee survey and you're like, whatever, they're just going to yell at me if I don't take it. So I'm going to take it in all fives. It's great. Best place to work ever. Versus working at a place where like, man, that survey is like our playbook for the year. Like, what do we need to improve on? What do we need to fix? What are people concerned on? What can we do better? What's working that we need to amplify? So yeah, it gave us so many tools, like quantification of metrics, tracking culture, diversity, engagement, tracking those things as a KPI that is as important as revenue. Changes your business. And you wake up and it's just like, it is essentially now baked in. It isn't like at the beginning, it's almost like kind of a fake it till you make it. And you're trying to make sure you're doing all these things. And after a while, it's all just process implementation. And it's almost like an ocean liner now, just smoothly sailing through the seas. So I'm full of analogies today, by the way. But yeah, that was the biggest benefit for us, is that mission lock, just helping us scale. And it's nice to just know, like, again, when I'm shopping, that I definitely go out of my way I was joking yesterday, I was wearing Tom's shoes with Bombas socks and Patagonia shorts, where I'm like, I'm pretty B Corp'd out right now. But I go out of my way to spend money there because I know they're doing business the right way.
What do you say? There's a common criticism of stakeholder capitalism, saying that companies shouldn't be getting involved in social issues. That's a place for nonprofits or for individual citizens to voice their opinions. What do you say to that argument?
A lot of things I won't repeat out loud. But why not? Why? And I always use the expression, why not us? Like, we're not a social enterprise. We do Salesforce consulting, we just feel like we have a platform to do good. Like, even our ecosystem, we're doing a workforce development program with Goodwill of North Georgia out of the Athens East side, which clearly East is behind me. So I'm pointing that direction. But yeah, we're doing a program like that. And it's like, it's not even about our business. It's not about our own diversity inclusion numbers. It's about the ecosystem. It's about Salesforce as a whole, that whole industry, even IT in general. How can we create more opportunity? How can we get involved in our community? How can we, through business, solve a lot of the systemic issues facing America and things that have been not done well for a really long time? How do we create opportunities for people when it's all you need to know is this technology? How do we collaborate with partners that maybe we wouldn't have collaborated with in the past, or maybe we would have never met each other? How do we be a force for good in our community and with our employees and with our customers and our suppliers? And how do we support local small businesses through our purchasing policy? How do we create that thriving local economy? The things that are all just wins. If you get into like an econ class and you start talking how these, one action unleashes like a chain link, it's like supply and demand. If this happens, then the demand curve shifts. And it's kind of the same thing with a lot of these solutions. If we do this, And the thing that you have to remember is, you know, we're a 100 employee company. We're not going to change the world, but we're not going to shift the demand curve. We're not going to shift the supply curve. But if we all have that attitude of like, well, if I can't shift the curve, what's the point? And then it's the definition of insanity. We're just expecting things to change, but we're doing the same. We're doing business the same old way we always have, and expecting some sort of different result. So I think it's important for every company to do their bit. And I don't know that you necessarily, you know, some companies are a lot more comfortable talking about issues that probably shouldn't even be deemed political. Like climate change shouldn't be a politics issue. Voting rights shouldn't be a political issue. Some of these things where it's like, whoa, this is political. Let's not talk about it. And you're like, how? But I think some companies are a lot more comfortable speaking out about it. And some companies are more comfortable just like, we're just going to do work. We're going to be in the background. We're going to be doing the things. We're going to be making change. And we don't necessarily want to talk about it. So I think there's both those elements. But yeah, I hate that aspect of like, and the other one too, or the stereotype is like that. And I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago, I think, and it's like, well, actually, no, we're a for-profit business. It was the B Corp owner. It's like, we're not the whole, like, first, it sounded like the first 15, 20 minutes, they thought it was like a nonprofit organization. Like, no. We're a for-profit. We're certified as a B Corp. And there's that like mentality sometimes that like, oh, so you must be, you guys don't make any money. Obviously, what do you collect donations? Like, how do you know, it's like, no, it's purpose and profit. And the more profit we can make, the more purpose we can have. Like, I look at these things of like, if we can nail this goodwill program, could we find funding that would allow us to scale it and have a greater impact? So to me, it's funny because like, yeah, most B Corp, like, talk to my CEO, like he's and I am too, an unapologetic capitalist. We like making money. We just don't want to have to step on people to make it. We don't want to have to be unethical. We don't have to treat people unfairly. We don't have to we don't want to like skirt or cheat the rules just a little bit to make money. We can do it the right way. We can make money. We can be a force for good in the world. And and the more money we make, the more we can scale our impact. You know, the more budget I have now, if our revenue goal for 2022 doubles of what it was this year or goes up by 50%, guess what my budget does? So, and I can go out and we can do more and we can get more involved and we can support more organizations and volunteer more hours. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and I love the question, but that's clearly I'm fairly passionate about the answer, or at least the answer as I see it, that I think it is. And at what point do we stop waiting on everybody else to do it? I think businesses and even entrepreneurs are uniquely positioned, uniquely skilled. I mean, entrepreneurs have been solving problems, the world's problems, for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of like, you know, how do we make bread that doesn't go stale by the time we get it to market? Like, these are all problems of like facing society forever. And entrepreneurs have always been the ones that step in and solve them. So why not now?
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's one thing I wanted to run this past you. When people think of the social enterprise movement or B Corp movement, I'm sure they think very left-leaning organizations, liberal economically and social. But I think Michael and we're both also, I don't want to speak too much for Michael, but I think we're unapologetically capitalists as well. I mean, we both are business owners, but so I actually think there's a kind of conservative argument for social enterprises. And it's basically the social enterprise movement uses capitalism to improve the system. Right, so it uses consumer education to influence demand. The alternative to improving a system, and everybody's wanting to, or everyone should be constantly seeking to improve a system, but the alternative is government regulation jumping in, which is it seems very very clear to me that conservatives or people that would typically be a little hesitant to jump on board with this should actually be supporting it. Do you think that's a fair argument?
I think there's an argument to be made there I mean, because in a weird way, this like a lot of the B Corp movement of like, you get points on the assessment for paying your employees a living wage. You get even more points if you pay them a family living wage. So you can sit and kick and scream and go, the minimum wage should go up and it should go up and it's not fair. Or, if you're a business owner, you're uniquely positioned to go like look at Dan Price, for example, was a couple years ago, like his minimum wage is $70,000 a year, every employee. And he reduced his salary and everybody went, he's crazy. He'll go out of business. They're doing fine. Gravity Payments doing just fine. So yeah, I think it's a bunch of people who just went like, well, we'll just make we'll make the regulation in ours and we'll be a part of a movement that changes the status quo. And let's be honest too, like there's so much gridlock in politics now. Like, how is anything productive ever going to happen again? You know what I mean? So it's like, kind of like, what other solutions are there? Do we just sit here and lament that nothing's going to change and we can never get better? We can never improve as a society? Or do we just go like, what other options are available for us? What resources do we have with which we can make positive change in the world? So that's kind of the way I look at it. And yeah, I think there is something to be said for like, this is the free market driving it. And Gen Z is part of that free market. I'd make that analogy all the time that people go like, oh, I hate greenwashing. I'm like, oh, don't get me wrong. Like it is somewhat like throw up in the mouth inducing sometimes when you see it and you're like, oh, how do they get away? Like who signed off on this ad? But it's like they're at least awakening to the point where they realize they have to do it, no matter how horribly inauthentic or unauthentic it is. But you're seeing that evolution of that started 15, 20 years ago. And now you're seeing it's like where it's like you just get called out when people see that it's empty. It's like, like Volkswagen a couple of years ago trying to do this, like, well, we really care. And like, do you care about the environment? Because the whole emissions thing, you guys remember doing that?
Yeah.
But it's forcing companies to take concrete steps to prove that they're doing it. And that's the market driving it. That's millennials. That's where I spend my money, where we spend our money. That's Gen Z coming into the market. And like, people think Gen Z is still like 14 years old and sitting at home, like, whatever. What is it? Twitch? Sorry, I just showed my age. Like, what's the thing they do? As I stereotype Gen Z, is they all video game. I'm that old guy. And turn your music down, kids. But like that, like they're not like the youngest. I think it's the youngest Gen Z turns like 26 this year. The oldest Gen Z, and the oldest millennial turns 41. So like we're kind of here, and we're the majority of your workforce. We're the majority of the consumer base. And we just kind of continue to have more of that purchasing power. And so, yeah, I mean, private enterprises are free to do whatever they want, but they're getting to a point where that demand for just a fair way of doing business that still rewards people for being first to market, bringing an innovative solution, solving people's problems better than anybody else has. All those things that capitalism rewards you for, still rewards you for, but it's also doing it in a way where you can be proud of how you did it. And that's what consumers want to see, and that's who they want to work for. So yeah, I don't know that I had drawn that conclusion, but it essentially is the free market. Just kind of this is the direction it's going. I mean, you're seeing more and more companies like Danone and what's the other big was it Ulta Beauty Supply? Like there's a bunch of these big like multinationals now that are going B Corp, and you're like, okay, I see you. Like that's kind of impressive. And it's like, there's a steel manufacturer out of Brazil. Like, I mean, there's just so many, like, that's not a traditional, like, like this isn't like a drum circle community. It's a bunch of people that make money that just kind of agreed to like, hey, let's make our money in the right way and let's put some guardrails around it.
Yeah. So what are you guys doing over at Be Local, Georgia?
Excited to finally hopefully see some people in 3D again. I think we're planning an event for July with Conscious Capitalism. one of the things that I went into, well, I guess it started in 2020 when we had a big conference last year. We did a big regional B Corp conference, and we invited everybody. Conscious Capitalism, the Florida chapter was a sponsor. I mean, we invited students. It wasn't just like a B Corp party, but we realized that in the Southeast, I guess, we went from like Maryland to Texas. There still isn't a huge, we're not Denver, we're not Portland, we're not New York City. We don't have strength in numbers, within each individual pocket. I think South Carolina's got 4 B Corps. Alabama has 2. Tennessee has 6. Kentucky has 10. We have 16 with a couple more that I'm just can't wait to announce, but that are coming soon. And Florida's got about 20. North Carolina's got about 30. So why don't we get together and build some community and collaborate together and get to know each other? And it's crazy. I don't think I realized it, and literally until like mid-sentence, how many of those people I collaborated with on that, or I had them on a panel, that we've done some sort of, either I've referred somebody to them, or we've done business with them, or they've done business with us, or like, I wish I had taken some sort of like economic impact survey out of just that little virtual conference that we threw. But I also got me thinking in Georgia, because eventually stuff's going back in person. We'll keep some of the virtual elements, I'm sure, but in Georgia, it's the same thing. I still only have 16 B Corps in Georgia. My goal is 21 by the end of the year, which is probably we're confident will happen. But I still don't have that like abundance where I can throw like a huge event. Like if 50% of the B Corps don't show up to my event, I don't have a lot of people there. So I went into this year thinking like, who else can we be collaborating with locally? And then that kind of brought me back to the whole thing I just said about like people getting there, people waking up and starting their journey. And there's plenty of organizations that maybe, I think traditionally maybe B Corps might have turned their noses at, because like, oh, well, you're not certified as a B Corp. Like there was like some sort of like air of like swagger or whatever to B Corps. And it's like, well, isn't it our duty as B Corp employees, as spokespeople for this movement, to like meet people wherever they are? I always use the Disney analogy of the people mover, but isn't it the people mover of progress? Isn't it our job, if this is where they're at and they want to improve, isn't it our job to help them and to join them and to hold their hand along the way and be an expert, be a whatever, a sounding board, collaborate with them, do business with them, and help and watch them grow? Because it's like when you get mad at that employee on their first day, who's like, I don't know how to do this. And you're like, everybody's had a first day. Everybody had a first day on this journey towards corporate social responsibility, towards being a better corporate citizen. So I've gone out of my way this year. I want to work with, this event will be with Conscious Capitalism. I've been talking to Go Beyond Profit about doing some things throughout the year. We've started bringing together all our universities. So we've kind of like with Dr. Sharma, with Grima landing at Georgia State, with what we've built at UGA, getting Emory and Tech and our HBCUs involved, and starting to have like meetings of the minds there to bring people together. So there's an academic front to what I want to accomplish this year of getting more B Corp into the curriculum as a part of a greater social enterprise, social innovation, corporate social responsibility curriculum. But also making sure nobody's reinventing the wheel, that we have all the resources. Let's share them. Let's be like a collaborative group. And then, getting more word out about B Corp and helping companies certify, working with companies that want to certify, even working with companies who just are at a point where they know they need to do something, but certification's we're not there yet. We just want to get a baseline for where we're at, define some KPIs, give ourselves like, let's look a year from now, what can we improve? Which ones can we drive? Let's set some goals. But the impact assessment is a beautiful tool for that, because it does all those things. And now you have it doesn't magically do them. But it gives you the framework to kind of set some goals and at least establish your current state, define your desired future state, and then figure out how you can kind of close that gap in. So, so a lot of education awareness, the university piece, and then, just more community. Like the July event, I want to call, building community through collaboration. So just getting people to know each other and getting the conscious capitalism circles to swim with the B Corp circles, to swim with the university circles, and just really kind of create an overall just business force, business movement of everybody that just wants to do better.
So that's your like primary vehicle of getting these corporations to take on that social impact approach is through academia and through these like events, or like what tactics are you using to go from 16 to 20 to 25?
I feel like in my mind it's been very calculated. If I had to describe it or write it down on paper, it's just it literally probably looks like me just throwing things against the wall. But academia has been very helpful. The projects through UGA that we've brought in have been, they've been great for the students, but it's also been, it's really easy for the companies. And in a weird way, it's like, I've stopped selling them as B Corp certification. Selling them, they're free. But I've stopped selling them in that manner because people are like, I don't know it. It scares me, or they don't understand the difference between B Corp and benefit corporation, and they think they have to I've just basically started saying, it's a corporate social responsibility product around the B Corp assessment framework, and we'll help your company. We can look at culture, branding, environmental outputs. Like we can look at different sections of this and kind of a la carte, and then put a student group around it that, if it's more environmentally focused, let's get some undergrads working on a sustainability certificate. If it's more culture, do we have an MBA that's, studying organizational behavior, like which pieces we can put together, get you the right student group, and kind of look at it as just a high level consulting project for your organization, its structure, and everything that goes into that. So that's been huge. And then, doing some B Corp 101 events. I think some of it's spreading organically now. So, because I'll find companies that get certified that I've never met before, or I'll get an email from a B Corp consultant. I have a really good friend out in California that does it, actually a couple. And, I'll get an email like, hey, I want you to meet so-and-so. They're working on B Corp certification. I'm helping them. They're in Atlanta. And you're like, oh, hey, which those are always like really cool, where it's like the monopoly, like a bank error has occurred in your favor. So yeah, a lot of these events, a lot of word of mouth, and just kind of like consistent, steady, like drip of information and sharing and promoting. And I think a lot of the stuff B Lab has done has helped as well, like kind of pushing some of the B2C brands to put the logo, like on the side of my whatever, I guess Danone makes milk now. I always think Danone, I think yogurt. But like I brought home a thing of milk, and it was like on the side was a whole like basically like B Corp ad and why they did it and how you can find out more. So I think that's now driving people to go like, huh. So, because even one of my other things too is like how many different industries we have just within Georgia. So if I have somebody interested, even if it's outside of Georgia, I can bring in somebody like, oh, you're a tourism company, or oh, you're a real estate development company. I know a B Corp. Like, let me get you on the phone with him, and you guys talk it out and figure out if this makes sense for you. So yeah, academia's been great. Word of mouth's been great. Even social media, although I must admit I only use LinkedIn. So if you do want to get in touch with Be Local Georgia, preferably use LinkedIn over Facebook, because I don't know when we'll see the message on Facebook. But yeah, that's been a lot of it. So all over the board, I guess. Again, I told you when I tried to describe it, it was going to sound like I just threw a bunch of stuff up against the wall, and maybe I did.
If it works, right?
Yeah, so looking through the B Labs directory, you see a lot of, you see waste management companies, you see recycling, you see, I don't know, some tech companies. Has there been any focus on getting more like local, like brick and mortars? And I mean by that, like, I think of like restaurants, or, I guess bars would probably, be one that I'd be interested in. Other amusements, and you mentioned tourism. Like, what's the strategy to get some of these that I don't see a lot of being certified at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say like for Athens personally, like I have a vision for Athens to become kind of a B Corp. In a weird way, we've become the Asheville of the South, like where I realized it sitting at Athenic one week, and I overheard some people sitting at on the patio table next to me. And they were telling like the the woman brought their beers and they were telling her that like they were here on a brewery trip. And I'm like, I started thinking like, oh, Athens does have 1, 2, 3, 4, like 6 or 7 now. Where I remember being an undergrad and it was like, I think Terrapin might have just started being a thing. So, but it's like a brewery destination. So I have this whole vision for Athens to like, you know, Asheville, if you go to Asheville, like if you've ever been downtown and gone to like French Broad Chocolates, French Broad's a B Corp. Like they have some of those. And like here, there's a chocolatier, or yeah, chocolatier. I think that's the right word. There's a chocolatier in Athens working on becoming B Corp certified right now. And then he also owns several restaurants. So in my head, I'm already like, and then that one, and then that one. And there is even in Atlanta, there's a coffee shop. I mean, they're a coffee roaster, but Peach Coffee Roasters is going through the assessment right now. And they're an alumni of they went through the UGA project the semester before COVID hit. So obviously they tabled it, but he sent me an email the other day that like everything's rolling, we're good, and we've restarted the process and we'll keep you posted. So, which is always fun that like, I don't know, those notes just kind of like pick you up a little bit. But yeah, so there's a big drive on our end. Like I would love to get some of the, like Athens, some of the local shops like downtown, the things that are uniquely Athens, like Dynamite, Community, Hilo, like even the Blind Pig, like some of these places where I'm like, I would love to at least work with them and get them like, what impact could I have? Could I get them to stop using like plastic styrofoam to go containers? Could I get them to like, you know, like when you go to the Mercedes-Benz, could I get them to move to all compostable stuff? You know, we have the municipality, like Athens, Clarke County has the facility to compost. Could we do that? Could we move to like where there's not even a trash thing? It's just recycling or compost. Like, how do I, you know, so those types of elements where like restaurants are crucial, like to make some of that big change, like I need those restaurants, I need the brick and mortars. I need people willing to give up plastic bags, and I need people that, you know, and that are a fabric of the community. So yeah, I think while it's nice to have the brand names, because I think in a weird way, it's like scaling a business. Like I need numbers, but I need the brand names because they recruit themselves. Like they recruit the, you know, the mom and pop, you know, restaurant down the street. That's who they see, that brand, and that, you know, their beer is stocked there. And oh man, we have New Belgium and we have Allagash and we have all these B Corp beers. What would it look like for me to do it? There's actually it's like a burger bar in Raleigh that's a B Corp that I can't wait to go try. Just waiting on my second shot. But yeah, there's more and more of that I'm seeing pop up. Even little like local breweries and regional breweries are certifying and going like 0% waste and all these different initiatives. So yeah, I think it's a big part of the overall growth strategy. Is it was always smaller businesses, and then it pivoted to like, we need some big ones. And now I think now as we've gotten the big ones, it's like those, keep bringing those in, and then they'll create almost like a Major League Baseball like farm system of people who now, like, because they're aspirational brands, others go like, what are they doing? B Corp? What's B Corp? Okay. It aligns with most of what we're doing anyway. Okay, let's do it. You know, so I think it will help drive that movement.
Are you waiting on anything specific to really like dive into that in Athens, or like?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple, we got our first one in Athens. We're working with a couple more local Athens companies, and then we have a couple more that are very close to certifying, which I think will go a long way in the community. So that's
cool.
As much as I'm at liberty to say.
Yeah. Is there a specific stage that you think it's most appropriate for these companies to seek certification, or
early? I would say earlier the better. It's just a lot easier. Less, you know, it's kind of like training. It's kind of like hiring somebody fresh out of undergrad versus somebody with 10 years of experience. I don't have any bad habits to break. Well, at my old company, I did it this way. Like, nobody cares. Like, that's not how we, you know, like those types of things where it's like, as the company grows up, you create some of those bad habits, and like you create some of those like internal processes that you're like, why do you do it that way? I don't know, because we've always done it that way. So I think it's a lot easier. And I think thinking ahead and road mapping, like that ability to envision yourself after you've scaled, or as you're scaling, or at 100 employees, at 250 employees. Not that it's an easy vision to formulate when you have 8, but it is you've put everything in place to get there. And you have the benefits that employees nowadays expect. You have the purpose that they'll expect. You have the work-life balance, flexible, remote type setup. Like, you have all these things that they're going to want. So it will enable it will empower your scaling as well. So yeah, earlier the better, but I think it's never too late. Especially, I mean, there's some people we've worked with that have been in business for 30, 40 years. And it's just like, no, I've been watching this from the sidelines and kind of ready to get involved. And it's the way we've always run our business, but I want to kind of put the framework around it and kind of be able to tell it, because it's also an awesome marketing vessel. How do you tell about this initiative on your environmental side and this one and that one? Like, B Corp kind of ties it all together. So I think it's a great way to market. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that you don't do it because you've been in business for 10 years. I would just say, if you're 2 years in and you have high hopes to scale and lofty goals for yourself and your business, I would say do it now and get out of the way.
Okay, well, that describes my company. But so there are direct and indirect costs associated with getting the certification, right? And these are annual costs, upfront costs. What kind of advice do you have for handling those costs when you're, a young company just trying to make sure you have runway for the next 6 months?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, some of it, it's funny, as I go through it, it's always like the first thing I do is, well, usually it's some discovery of like, what is the culture? Let me talk to some employees. What's the vision? Let me see some of the marketing collateral. What are we telling people? Let me get a sense of like what this business stands for and like what your people think it stands for and their experience versus the owner's experience. And step 2 is going through the assessment. So always have the business owner take the assessment first, and then we'll look through the assessment. I go through it like fine tooth comb and create what I call a point matrix, which is essentially, here are a bunch of available points based on what our current answers are. And then, is it low hanging fruit? Is it medium? Is it what I'll call get out the step ladder? And then the third level of like, do I need to call my buddy that owns a cherry picker? Because this one's way up there. And then you can prioritize, like, this one's easy. This one's a policy we need to add in the handbook. Or for us at 8 employees, this one's the handbook and all the policies that go into it, because we're going to need one of those at some point. So let's just go ahead and do it. And then there's stuff that when you look at, like, okay, a 401k with a full match, 401k with a partial match. And that's when you start kind of going like, which one of these do I want to have? What can we budget for? What do I need to be accruing? And you can kind of plan those. Like, I wouldn't recommend trying to like finish your B Corp certification in 2 weeks. I've worked with a company that this has been a 3-year process of them kind of setting the things up as using that as their roadmap of like, all right, we need to be thinking about, if we're going to do this, what do we need to be budgeting? What percentage of revenue would a 401k with a match be? What percentage of revenue would be 100% employee premium paid health insurance? What would 40 hours of volunteer time off a year look like if we offered that as a benefit? What would an extra 2 paid days off look like as a benefit? What if we did part-time benefits? What is that? So you can start like going through, and then you analyze, what are my costs here? And then starting to think of like, I hate the ROI question, but there's something you said of like, what's the ROI on this? What do I get back? Yeah, I mean, are you really going to scale and recruit employees if you don't have some sort of a retirement plan or a decent health insurance? Or like, you're going to need these things anyway. But maybe you can spruce them up a little bit too and be like a great place to work versus benefits are good. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that. And then also there's a time and energy calculation it goes into, which is why I think the big appeal for some of these businesses to join something like the B Collaborative and let students from UGA work on this project. Because if you're scaling, we could squeeze a couple hours out of Jeff on a Sunday to knock out whatever we need you to pull all expenditures from 2017. Okay, he can do that, but he doesn't need to be the one. His time, he's growing a business. Like, we can crunch the number. We can Google like where are they headquartered, who owns them, blah blah blah. Like, we can do a lot of that legwork. So I think that's the other part too. Is like, if you're committed, it's a light lift time wise for a business owner if you go about it the right way, or hire a consultant, which is still well worth your time to invest that money so that you're not the one doing all the work.
At UGA, is your program like in cohorts, like with the semesters, I guess?
Yeah, and we run classes out of the MBA program. Next year will actually be a formal B Corp class. So with a formal corporate social responsibility class, but we also run ad hoc Friday. Like, if students want them, I'll find them. Like, there was a club that did a couple projects this year, and then we're kind of using the same framework and same model and templates, and a lot of stuff's pretty easy too. We have policy templates. We have a lot of those things where it's like, what kind of like a legal proofed whistleblowing policy. We have that, versus trying to do this on your own. You're like, oh, I need to write a whistleblowing policy. I need an ethics policy. Like, I need an ethical marketing and advertising policy. Like, you're just going down Google rabbit holes at that point.
Well, Nathan, how can people, for the listeners that are in Georgia, how can they get more involved in the B Corp movement here? And for those that are outside of it, what should they be doing?
Find your B local if there is one. There's one in Asheville. There's one in Tennessee, just started one. There's Florida for Good. There's B local Triangle. There's B local Mid Atlantic, and then there's B local Georgia if you're in Georgia. And we all play nice together. We all now just been collaborating like crazy together. But join B Local Georgia. I mean, it's not like join. I mean, just start following us on LinkedIn. We'll keep you appraised of events and things coming up and cool panels and cool news. And I would say if you're a business owner, this creates some chaos for my inbox, but yeah, I mean, email me or DM me on LinkedIn. I'm a tough one. LinkedIn.com/Nathan A. Stuck. That was tough. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn or Be Local Georgia. Send us a message to Be Local Georgia. And I mean, it's probably going to be me reaching out and connecting, but we need projects. I want to run projects at every university in the state. Is my end goal, where students get exposed to this early on, and we can kind of build something that lasts and that grows organically. But yeah, connect, follow. If you have questions, if you want to jump on a call to discuss all those things, or you want to meet somebody in your shoes at a B Corp and, in your industry, I probably make that happen as well. So yeah, definitely LinkedIn is probably the way to go for both following Be Local Georgia and connecting with me, and whatever questions you have, whatever concerns, whatever you want to talk about.
We'll be sure to include those links in the description below. Nathan, thank you so much for all you do. Thank you for being so generous with your time. This has been a wonderful episode. It's very informative for me, I know. So thank you so much for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And again, it's anytime you want me to talk B Corps, just give me the microphone, point me to the stage. So happy to share my love for this new amazing form of capitalism that, again, I said it earlier, but it works for everyone and it works for the long term. So appreciate the opportunity, guys.
Yeah, it's great to meet you, Nathan, and go Dogs, right?
Go Dogs.